It started like any other day, but things quickly took a turn when two confident female officers approached, demanding an ID. Their tone was firm, their stance unyielding. They were certain they were in control, but they were about to face a twist they didn't see coming. On the other side of this encounter stood someone who knew their rights inside and out, someone calm, collected, and ready to stand their ground. As the conversation unfolded, the tension grew, and the officers soon found themselves in an unexpected position, challenged not by hostility, but by undeniable facts. You won't believe how quickly the dynamic shifted as the power of knowledge came into play. What started as a routine stop turned into a masterclass in asserting personal freedom. Stay tuned to see how this showdown unfolds. You're about to witness a moment that leaves everyone questioning how much they really know about their rights. As the officers pressed for identification, their confidence seemed unshakable. They spoke with authority, assuming compliance was just a matter of time. But the person they were questioning wasn't your average citizen. Calm and respectful, they stood their ground, asking a simple but powerful question. Am I being detained? That one phrase was enough to momentarily pause the officers, creating a noticeable shift in the energy of the interaction. Viewers watching might wonder what led up to this moment. The setting was an ordinary street, a public space where nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Yet for some reason, the officers felt compelled to intervene. Was it their instinct, a misunderstanding, or something else entirely? As the person continued to ask questions rather than simply comply, the officers began to show subtle signs of unease. Who was really in control here? The tension was rising, and the answer wasn't as clear as it first seemed. The officers doubled down, their voices firm as they repeated the demand for identification. Their body language suggested they weren't used to being questioned, especially not like this. But the person standing in front of them wasn't flustered. Instead, they calmly replied, "I'm not required to show ID unless I'm suspected of committing a crime. Can you tell me what law I've broken?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and it was clear that the balance of power in the conversation was beginning to shift. One officer glanced at the other, as if searching for the right response. The frustration in their eyes was clear, but they couldn't seem to provide a clear answer. Meanwhile, passers-by began to slow down, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Were the officers overstepping, or was this a misunderstanding spiraling out of control? The tension grew thicker, leaving everyone wondering how far this encounter would go. The officers were visibly growing more impatient. One of them stepped closer, her voice sharper now as she tried to reassert control. "If you don't provide your ID, we'll have no choice but to escalate this." But the calm response they received seemed to catch them off guard yet again. "Respectfully, unless you can articulate reasonable suspicion, I'm exercising my right to remain free from unlawful searches or detainment." The tension was palpable. Nearby, a small crowd had started to gather, their murmurs adding to the charged atmosphere. Some people had their phones out, recording the interaction. The officers exchanged a quick look, clearly weighing their next move. They were trained for many situations, but this one seemed to be slipping through their fingers. Suddenly, one officer reached for her radio, as if calling for backup might shift the dynamic. The air was thick with anticipation. What would happen next? As the officer spoke into her radio, the crowd grew more restless. Whispers of "what's going on?" and "do they even have a reason?" rippled through the bystanders. The person at the center of it all, still standing calmly, didn't waver. Their voice cut through the noise, firm but steady. "You're calling for backup because I'm asking questions. All I want is clarity. Am I free to go, or are you detaining me?" The officer hesitated, lowering the radio slightly. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. Meanwhile, the second officer took a different approach, trying to reason with the person. Look, we're just trying to do our job here. If you cooperate, we can clear this up quickly. But the response was immediate and unwavering. Your job doesn't include violating my rights. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Someone in the crowd stepped forward. I'm an attorney, they announced loudly. And I'd like to know the legal basis for this interaction. The officers froze, the tension between them now undeniable. The stakes had just been raised, and everyone was holding their breath to see how this would unfold. The declaration from the attorney shifted the entire dynamic. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly realizing they were now under even closer scrutiny. One of them hesitated before finally addressing the crowd. This is a routine check. We're just trying to ensure everything is in order. But the attorney wasn't backing down. Routine checks don't override constitutional rights, they said firmly. Unless you can state probable cause, this interaction needs to end. The officer holding the radio slowly put it down, the tension in her posture giving way to hesitation. The crowd's quiet support grew louder, with murmurs of agreement rippling through the onlookers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officer closest to the person stepped back and said, "You're free to go." As the crowd began to disperse, the person nodded calmly and walked away. But just as the officers seemed ready to leave, another voice from the crowd called out, "Next time, make sure you know the law." The officers didn't respond, but their expressions said it all. This encounter wasn't just about ID. It was a reminder of the power of standing firm, knowing your rights, and holding those in authority accountable. As the person walked away, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the energy of the moment lingered. It wasn't just an encounter, it was a lesson in standing up for what's right, even in the face of pressure. The officers returned to their car, their conversation quiet, perhaps replaying the situation in their minds. Meanwhile, the attorney who had stepped forward caught up with the person briefly. "You handled that perfectly," they said with a nod. Not many people stay that calm under pressure. The person smiled, appreciative of the support, and replied, "It's not about being difficult. It's about knowing where the line is and holding firm." The interaction left an impression not just on the officers, but on everyone who witnessed it. It wasn't about confrontation. It was about clarity and accountability. As the street returned to normal, the moment served as a reminder. Knowledge is power, and standing up for your rights matters.